to dive right back into space and blood and guts, I played Dead Space 3.
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa, I know. I said I was going to do it, and then I did it. And to boot, because I'm special, I actually completed my second playthrough.
Oh my gosh.
Mega fast speed, man. So Dead Space 3 is, I think, about 6 months to a year after the events of Dead Space 2. Isaac Clarke is living, I don't even remember where, on a random planet. I mean, it's Earth. It's definitely Earth. I'm stupid. He's living on Earth in a shithole by himself. He's all depressed because Ellie, the lady that he met in the second game, that there was clearly a romantic thing between them during the game. They definitely dated for a while, and it didn't work out very well, and Isaac is all sad about it. He's doing the whole looking longingly at a photo out a window and then tearing it in half. He's being an emo boy. Clearly, just the relationship didn't work out very well. Probably because Isaac is fucking insane, probably that. He gets forcefully recruited by the last remnant of EarthGov to fight off what is apparently like a mass, I don't know what to call it, some sort of basically jihad by unitology, being led by a very forgettable lead guy, which is a big diss to this game. They're trying to take over Earth. There's just a war going on right outside his window, and Isaac is all, I don't care. I want to pay my rent and do nothing.
Dude, same.
Yes, but he doesn't even do anything. He's all just sad and drinks whiskey. Like, literally, the first shot like pans down to his desk. There's a bottle of whiskey and a bunch of old photos, and the lighting's dramatic, and it's like, oh dear, this is going to be a melodrama story, isn't it? And it is. The plot mostly consists of Isaac going on this mission to primarily find Ellie. Ellie is a agent for like super secret EarthGov stuff, and she was on a mission to go discover a thing to blow up a marker or whatever. This one gets really in the weeds. So he gets forced on this mission. They go find Ellie while running away from unitology. They go to a planet whose name I don't remember, and it's thought to be the home planet of the markers, where they came from. Are you okay with spoilers?
Sure.
It's an old enough game. I figure I could just do the whole thing.
Yep.
And it turns out that the world is not actually, later on in the game, you find out that this is not the home world of the markers. It's another planet that fell to the markers, because the markers are even older and even more spooky from somewhere else that's never explained. So this is a random snow planet that, has aliens on it and stuff, and it's just another culture that fell susceptible to the markers' influence. So you are simultaneously running away from like the army of unitology, who are trying to do convergence through plot-related reasons. I swear I played this game twice, and a lot of these details are still pretty fuzzy, and I really tried to pay attention. So there's that, and then the story on the background, I guess, of it turns out that one of the lead army guys from EarthGov that doesn't like you and is mad is Ellie's new boyfriend, and that's one of the reasons why he's on this mission to find her. So there's a love triangle and a lot of melodrama about, but what if we went back together and we could make it work? And then the army guy is like, I'm a douchebag and I hate you. Like, that's his whole persona. Along the way, you meet Carver, who, if you play co-op, is the secondary protagonist. I only played this single player, so I don't know much about him. He is a blank slate, basically. They give him a little bit of characterization through cutscenes. He had lost his family. I don't know if it was to unitology, or it's pretty vague, but he's all guilt-ridden, and he has demons to face and stuff. He just kind of appears randomly throughout the game, which is also a big criticism. This game was definitely designed to be played co-op, so playing it single player means that there's probably 25% of it that you just don't have access to, and a lot of that would be like Carver's entire personality and story. Not that I've heard there's much there, but it's just all not there. Like, there's nothing for you to really grab onto. He's just there, and you have to infer through cutscenes. So yeah, you go to space, you go on a bunch of ships, you're trying to find Ellie, and that's about the first half, maybe first third of the game is going on a bunch of old derelict ships, which is actually really, really cool setting-wise. So there are two primary settings for the game. One is in space and on old ships that are hundreds of years old that encountered the marker before the first time, and they're pretty fucking cool. There are old versions of technology that you'd be familiar with from playing the games, like say for instance doors. A lot of the doors, instead of you pressing A or whatever corresponding button to open up the the hollow screen that's on the door to open it up and you go through, you have to use your kinesis to turn the crank like it's a fucking submarine, which gets really annoying after a while, but it's a really neat detail. Like, the ships are actually pretty well designed as very old Earth tech.
It's not the only crank getting turned on a submarine.
So true. Seaman. Like, it's still futuristic for us, but they do a really good job of making these ships seem old for where the Dead Space universe is. It has kind of that Halo-ism where it's like, why is this 500 years in the future, but we're still using like projectile ammunition thing? It's neat. On those ships, you encounter necromorphs. Big surprise. They are different for a bunch of different reasons. The same archetypes mostly apply. You have like the scorpion guy, the leaper, I think is the official name. You have the little demon babies with the tentacles.
Is it leaper or leper?
I think it's leaper.
Okay.
Because they leap.
All right.
Pretty sure. You have your basic necromorph form, the grabby guy with the arms. You have the guardian, the guy stuck to a wall with tentacles coming out of his gut, stuff like that. But they're all a little different because they're from the past. They've been sitting here, I guess, hibernating basically on these like abandoned ships. So they're like brown mostly. They're just dead. Like, they're very decayed, falling apart looking things, which is really cool in concept. And I think if you look at some of the designs, like if you look at the 3D render in a vacuum, they're pretty cool, but they end up really getting samey after a while because of they're brown. Like, it's a basic color palette problem, whereas in Dead Space 1 and to some extent Dead Space 2, they're red and purple and they're very fleshy. They're very fresh bodies. Even if Dead Space 1 age-wise is pretty rough, it's just harder to display decaying flesh. Especially in Remake, it really showed. They're like, these are current, these corpses were cobbled together 5 minutes ago, whereas on these ships, these very old forms are decayed old crew members, and that's pretty cool. It just is a shame that they don't stick out as much. I don't know if it would be better if it's necessarily a problem with the designs themselves, if they could have done a different shade, if it's a lighting problem potentially, but they just kind of look the same. Leapers especially, they have their like the upgraded form where they are like blackish. That's all of them now for some reason. I don't know if it's the gameplay wise, if they have the same stats as the typical upgraded leaper, but they just look like that now, which is cool. They're like black and have glowing eyes, but also it makes them just kind of hard to fight because when they're thrashing around, it blends in with the environment a little too much, and I don't think that that's an intentional thing. It makes gameplay a little bit more difficult. Also, a pretty big addition gameplay-wise, especially the first half of the game on these ships, is old crew members. They're basically zombies, which I don't like. There's this really neat idea that, like, silhouette-wise, they actually look pretty similar to your typical necromorph because they all have axes. Like, because they're like miners. It's a very dumb aesthetic thing. So they're just basically zombies that run at you. They fight very similar to necromorphs. They don't jump as much. But it's kind of a neat little idea to make them like dual wield axes, so they have the same kind of similar animations and stuff, which is, I think, kind of neat. I think they use them way too much. Like, in the game is way bigger and filled with way more necromorphs. It is even more action heavy than 2. The horror is almost entirely gone in terms of like presentation. It's still gross and icky, but they're not scary anymore. But I just think that they use them too much. I don't know why. It's just really, really like in the opening of the game, when you're trying to escape from Earth, there are all these crew members or like security guards or whatever that are getting converted into necromorphs. I just don't know what the in-lore justification for it is, because typically they would turn into regular necromorphs. Like, that's the process. When an infector, it goes, the big bat sucky boy goes down on a corpse and then turns it into a necromorph. They sprout their extra limbs and they do the whole thing. So I just don't know why they made that choice. Maybe
your choice to say goes down on a corpse wasn't the best.
No, I did that intentionally.
Okay.
Yeah, the sucky bat things. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. I think it was intended to add variety to gameplay, but I don't think it really helps very much. If anything, it feels like we're taking away from the horror of the necromorphs because we're kind of just fighting humans for a large part of the game. In addition to that, especially in the opening and in the final act of the game, you fight a lot of unitology soldiers. They're just guys with guns. They die pretty easily. They headshots kill them instantly. It's just they're like placeholders, which again makes sense because that's how humans die. But in a game that's focused, like, the big thing initially was like, you gotta shoot the limbs and not the head because it's like a unique gameplay mechanic. It does really detract from the experience, because then you can just whip out the Gatling gun and just and they're dead. So it kind of takes away from that, which is lame. In the second half of the game, you encounter a bunch of alien necromorphs, which are really fucking cool. The gameplay is almost identical, like animation-wise, it's pretty similar, which is a little lame, but the designs are really cool. This other species of whatever they are like kind of like the creatures from A Quiet Place. They're what's the term? Not crustaceans. They have exoskeletons. What's the term for that? They're bony. The fleshy bits are inside the bones.
Yes.
Fuck, you know what I'm talking about, though. I don't remember the distinction, but like, they're spindly and they have big bone protrusions and stuff, and that's pretty cool. They look really cool. They're designed well. They provide a bit of a difference in gameplay. They do get a bit repetitive in design. I don't think they made enough variety of them, but they're a nice way to spice it up at the end, because you're in the core of this alien planet trying to turn off the machine that'll make convergence happen everywhere or whatever.
My big bony protrusion will help spice it up at the end.
That's true. The end is also the beginning when it comes to you, though. Oh wait, no. 3 seconds has a beginning, middle, and end. So that's fair. Never mind. I was too harsh. So that's really cool. I think they're just designed really well. The little baby crawler thingies that have the tentacles that pop out of their backs in the whole game are actually these aliens, and you would know if you look at them carefully. They're not fetuses with tentacles. They look weird. I think it's just the age of the game makes it a little hard to tell what's going on with their design, but it's a cool setup, I guess, to the fact that there are other species in this game other than humans and necromorphs. So I think that's pretty cool. The boss fights are shit. They're a lot. If Dead Space 2's boss fights were fine, Dead Space 3's are pretty shit. They're very, very repetitive, more repetitive than 2's even. There's an indestructible creature. I don't remember what it's called. I don't care. A big scorpion type thing, big as a house, and you fight it like 5 or 6 times in this game, and it always runs off instead of dying until the end. The way you kill it is pretty cool. You use like a repelling grappling mining setup to rip it apart, which is pretty cool. But it's
like Alien 3 kind of.
Sort of, yeah. Like you lure it into a spot and then you shoot it with a harpoon and then you like crank the harpoon until it rips it limb from limb. It's pretty cool. But the actual boss fight is crap. You shoot the glowy orbs, but then it charges you and then you have to dodge and then you have to shoot the glowy orbs, and it sucks. It's not thought out very well, and its design is pretty crap. It just doesn't look interesting. So I like the split setting. The game length is a lot. It's too long in my opinion, but I thought when we were leaving the ships in space in the first half, I was like, oh, the game is wrapping up. We're almost to the end. And it's like, boom, no, second setting, you're going to a snow planet. And it's a cool change up. It makes the game have variety. It also really tells you exactly where Callisto Protocol got every single part of it. It was from the end of Dead Space 3. Like, every aesthetic design choice, from it being set on a snow planet, is clearly trying to do Dead Space 3 but with better technology, which is commendable even if it sucked. I guess it's weird. So yeah, the plot is pretty stupid. The twists and turns are just not very interesting from a lore perspective. It's very I don't know. It's not engaging anymore. The threat in the first game was really well done, and in the second game, it does lose a little bit of its mystery, but it still maintains a level of ambiguity about the marker's origins and what Unitology is getting up to in the background, whereas this one is just, Unitology is finally doing their jihad coup to take over the planet, and they want to do convergence everywhere. Their head leader guy is horribly bland as a head leader, a bad guy, religious zealot guy. It's boring. The story interpersonally between the characters could have been interesting, about like lost love and, you know, screwing up relationships because of your own problems, not just growing apart, and like how that impacts a person. I think that some of that is very interesting, but they just kind of turn it into a melodrama and make it a love triangle for no real reason. I just find it very disengaging, and, you know, what's supposed to still be a horror action game, it's a very bizarre element. So yeah, story and plot and characters are all pretty bland and flat and uninspired. There's definitely some background lore. Like, I think the big whiteboard with the yarn that they had when they made this was probably really interesting. Like, I want to read the Wikipedia, but I don't think it makes it engaging in the actual game. There's a massive shit ton of text and audio logs, and they're all pretty unengaging on that front.
Jedi Survivor has been awful for that. Like, I finally hit halfway yesterday, and like, oh my gosh, it's like 600 entries at like halfway.
Woof.
It's been terrible. I've been meaning to look up like how many there actually are. So yeah, I think it was definitely thought out well ahead of time, but in combination with some other things that I'll get to in a minute, I think it got lost in translation, and I think probably what the publisher wanted this game to be differed from what the devs wanted, and maybe the devs just had some bad ideas that they should have hammered out some more. It was also rushed out pretty quickly after Dead Space 2, from what I can tell. The graphical differences are pretty minimal. There's definitely more texture and more lighting. The lighting was definitely a big upgrade, but there's a lot of asset reuse as well. I think that might be one of the reasons why they have you go on ships, is because they can reuse like the skeletons of the previous locations pretty much. There's a lot of repeated locations in the spaceships that you go to. There's multiple spots where I'm like, I swear I've been in this corridor before, or this like radio communications room, and I'm on a different ship than I was before. Like, it gets a little samey, which is kind of sad, because it is a really cool setting of like all these old derelict falling apart ships that nobody's been on in like 200 years. The snow planet sections get extremely linear, which I don't appreciate. It just gets a lot less interesting with how all that progresses. There's a lot of repelling sections in the third act, or the end of the second act, and I fucking hate them. One, the camera angle is skewed. So, you know, big gamer problem. You know, when you do a section and like a cutscene, like an interactive cutscene, and the camera angle is facing one way, and when you don't know whether you should use the thumbsticks to point
the character in the direction where they're facing or where the camera's facing. And I have that problem in the rappelling sections. Whereas you should be using the controls from Isaac's perspective, but the camera is Dutch angled and off to the side. So like,
this is weird because you love Dutch angles
in movies when they're useful, but not in gameplay. It's annoying. I think it's partially intended to give you some of the scope of what you're climbing and so you can see obstacles ahead of time, but it really, really detracts from the experience. It's just really janky. The loading animation for getting the rappelling system up is obnoxious and takes forever. It's unskippable. The way you have to jump over like holes in the walls and stuff just barely works. The amount of times I had to redo rappelling sections or I rage quit on them is high. I think it's the only part of the game where I would end my session in a bad mood was doing that. The rest of it was pretty milquetoast, but those sections pissed me off royally. The only, I guess, exception to that is the final one. Instead of rappelling up, you're rappelling down very quickly. It's a chase sequence, and you have to shoot necromorphs while you're going down the wall. I think that one works a lot better, just because I think it's more gracious with like its hitboxes and like foot detection on the wall. It just feels more polished. Like I said earlier, presentation-wise, most of the horror is gone. There's a handful of really crappy jump scares, there's one right in the beginning of the game that's just dumb. A lot of the psychological elements have been removed, partially because Isaac is supposed to not be like completely cuckoo crazy. He's just supposed to be depressed and stupid. And I like that. That was one of the things about Dead Space. I loved what it does both. It has physical horror. Not both. It does more than it has cosmic horror. It has physical horror, and it has psychological stuff. And Dead Space 2 retained a lot of it, even if it had less, I would say, of the like eldritch horror. There's a lot less of that. 3, there's no real hallucinations or flashbacks or anything like that stick out, which is lame. That's something I really liked about the first game, and I did appreciate that 2 stuck with it for the most part, especially because the final battle of 2 is like basically a hallucination sequence that you fight. It's just weird. I think the primary reason for that is because in the end of Dead Space 2, you basically kill Nicole in your mind, which means that you no longer are traumatized by that. But I just think that makes 3 have less material to work with. I think that they should have come up with some good impetus for that. Isaac is necessary because, he's the destroyer of the markers and whatever. He has all these keys in his head, but they don't really show them off in any interesting ways, especially from a horror angle. He's just kind of there. And he's pretty passive in terms of plot stuff, which is impressive, especially in comparison to Dead Space Remake, where they make him an extremely active protagonist, where he's like, go here, do this, fuck you, I'm gonna do this. And I think 2 has a decent level of that, but 3 is like very... He feels passive in Dead Space 1 because he's a hollow person, and that's the gameplay mechanic. In 3, he has a persona, and they just don't use it. So it feels insulting. I think is a good way to put it. Like gunplay wise, it's fine. It's the issues with 2 that I have where it feels like the enemies are a lot more damage spongy and the weapons are a lot less unique, are just kind of more like kill the enemy focused, is increased here dramatically. There is a gunsmithing system, which I think is an interesting idea, but I don't think it works very well, whereas you only have 2 weapon spots now, and you can combine weapons to have an upper and a lower weapon or tool. So you can have a plasma cutter with like a bolt shooter, or a ripper with a shotgun, which is cool, but it does pretty much require that the game has universal ammunition for everything, which it does, and that makes it kind of... It doesn't encourage me to use different weapon types. I think it's intended to, but it does the opposite. It just means I stick with what works and I use it for everything. The only real time I change my weapons is if I find something really interesting and new, and then I test it out. or if I force myself to use something different. My primary combination for both playthroughs was a plasma cutter with a flamethrower, or a plasma cutter with a bolt projectile. I don't remember what it's called. And then my other weapon was either a machine gun or a shotgun with a sub of like an electrical charge like dart. And I used that for like the whole fucking game, both times. I barely changed it. The upgrade system is very overhauled as well for weapons. There's a bunch of different chips that you can find around the world. Some of them are worth more than others, where it's like +3 damage, +3 damage, +1 clip, stuff like that. And they barely feel any different. It's minutia. I think that was a dumb idea. I get the idea. I don't think that this is a game series where that was a good idea. I think the traditional upgrade system that they have with the very basic regular node upgrades for 1 and 2, and definitely in Remake, is a really good system. I don't think that this was a good idea. This is a really big deviation, and it just turns it into an action game. You have either your pistol that goes big boom, or you have your machine gun that goes ba 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 ba, like, and you shoot enemies in the same way, and it just kind of, it makes it very meh. It blends together a lot. Also in presentation, the soundtrack is really good, but it's used pretty poorly. Same problem with 2 to an extent. The tracks are really cool. They're very grandiose when you encounter, a new monolith or whatever, and sometimes they're kind of spooky, but they're just not utilized well. They don't transition very well between each other. It rapidly changes tone very quickly between cutscene and action and stuff like that. It does have a banger of an end credit song, though, to be fair, so that was pretty cool. The gunsmithing system also introduces microtransactions. 2 already had plenty of them. They were mostly new skins or new gun parts. It wasn't great, but I didn't feel like it was really cheating me out of anything. Dead Space 3's store is huge. The amount of upgrades that are locked behind it, the unique weapon blueprints, it's bad. If you act like it's not there, the game still plays fine, but it's really hard to ignore it when every time you load the game up, it asks you to put in your code to access the online features, like every time. And the servers aren't up anymore, so the fuck. That's dumb. Again, also requires an online pass. Like, you have to pay to play online co-op. The fuck. I'm assuming couch co-op works fine. I have no knowledge of that. At some point, I would like to do couch co-op. I think it would be fun to do those side missions with Jacob.
Yeah, we were gonna last weekend, but it didn't work.
Yeah, I do think that there is definitely value in that. And I don't think making it a co-op game is inherently a bad idea, but I think you should have done make it's Isaac Clarke 1 and Isaac Clarke 2. Don't do we need a new character, but we don't have time to develop them or anything. There's just magically 2 Isaac Clarkes. Deal with it. Like, I feel like that's a better system for a lot of games, and I think that would be fine. There's two Master Chiefs in the room. Who cares? The end of the game is ambiguous and not in a very positive way. It's very, we're gonna do our final sacrifice, but maybe we're not actually dead shit, because Isaac has nothing to live for, blah, blah, blah. I think it really doesn't handle it well, because the rest of the game has been so melodramatic with a lot of its events. It just doesn't land very well. I wouldn't mind it in like an ideal world if the third game Isaac finds meaning outside of his mental illness and his trauma and is like, I'm going to save the universe. But like, I don't think that's a bad idea, but just this game has no real depth to justify it. Big L on real quick. Upgrades for your rig are fine. They function pretty similar to the first 2 games, but the rigs themselves are all ugly as fuck. When you finally unlock like the legacy like Dead Space 1 rig, it looks good, it functions fine, but that I believe is unlocked on New Game Plus or some arbitrary collect most of the collectibles or whatever. You do change rigs throughout the game in some sections. It's like, oh, you need the snow rig because it's too cold outside. I just think they all look bad. Like, they're not ugly as hell, but they don't fit they fit the world fine, but I think that Isaac Clarke's face in the first game, that helmet is so iconic. And 2 tries to do it in a modern way, and it's okay. I think it definitely works. This one's just like, there's just lights on their faces. The pattern isn't interesting or anything. It just kind of bleh. Which is lame. And on New Game Plus, which functions fine, I guess, you can do New Game Plus and then change the difficulty as well. So if you're just trying to grind out for all the upgrades or whatever, you can drop it down to easy. That's fine. Unskippable cutscenes. Sin. Into the sin bin. There's a lot of cutscenes. It's a lot of game time I'm spending doing nothing. Fuck you. That's stupid. I think on your first playthrough, I don't think cutscenes should be skippable. Hot take, I think they should be forced. But on repeat, they should definitely be skippable. It's just annoying. I'm probably gonna wrap up a few more things. I'm not hating it.
I would say first time viewing of a cutscene shouldn't be skippable, but
but if you die and then you have to reload, yes.
Right, playing Jedi Survivor, I've been skipping a lot of the introductory cutscenes to the boss that I'm dying to, so
that's fair. Yeah. There is a mode which I'm interested in. It's called, I think it's Classic mode, and it removes the gunsmithing thing entirely. You have to just find regular weapons and play it like Dead Space 1 or 2. So that's cool. I'll probably try that. It wasn't very hard. It was just frustrating in some areas.
What difficulty did you play on?
I played on normal, and then my second playthrough was on easy.
Yeah.
I will probably try to do impossible mode, which is like the mega super death one.
I assume there's an achievement for that.
Probably. I believe this is one of those ones where it deletes your save file if you die, though. That is something I don't like. I think you should have to start from the beginning, but I think just fucking your save file if you die, especially in a game like this that can be kind of buggy, I do think is bad. I don't like that. But I do want to kind of check it out on Classic, and I will play the co-op. I think once I finish it, I get as much of the stuff that I want to play through. I play the co-op stuff. I will probably never play it again. Total play time for one playthrough was about 12 hours, 12 to 15, somewhere in that neck of the woods. I don't know if it counts cutscene time. That's always confusing on how games count that. Second playthrough was probably 10 hours. So first playthrough is comparable, I think, to Dead Space 1-ish, and then second was more comparable to Dead Space 2 because I knew where I was going and I knew where all the secret rooms are and shit. It's not bad. It's just the piece of whole wheat toast with butter. I'd rather have a bagel.
You know how much you got it for?
Oh, actually, that's funny. I forgot about that. I bought this digitally on the Xbox store for $4 because it was on some super mega ultra sale. So that value-wise was 100% worth it. It just, if I had bought this at launch for $60, I probably would be pretty disappointed. So I would say, like, if you're in a used game store and it's $5, $10, I feel like that's okay, but I really don't know if this was worth that much at launch. It's just meh. It's very meh. It's like, yeah, it's middle of the road in a lot of ways.